I'm Hannah Suarez from the Bayanihan Project, and today we have with us Barry Harrigan, the founder of Bayanihan Project, to talk to us about this mission of eradicating global poverty. Barry, thank you for joining us today. When did you start becoming a philanthropist?
Well, Hannah, it was really only in the last 10 years that I took philanthropy really seriously. Um, Prior to that, I had spent, the entire 40-year career really operating as an entrepreneur, as a business person, someone who bootstrapped companies and started many companies with success over the years. But it was only after I had sold a couple of businesses and I reached a point in life where I was going to start, making very meaningful donations to charity. And I started to approach those donations much the same way I would have approached, being an investor. So I can't say that I've been a philanthropist my whole life. I think it's only recently, and it's only maybe in the last, certainly in the last 10 years, where I have approached philanthropy sort of with the same kind of passion and rigor in terms of the kind of, in terms of thinking about the way, I would give away that hard-earned money that I made over the years.
Tell us about your guiding principles when it comes to philanthropy and giving.
Philanthropy, for me, is sort of a heartfelt mission. It has to come from a place of meaning. After a long life lived, you reflect on the things that have sort of meant the most to you. So in your philanthropy, you're trying to find that meaning for giving back. And then, of course, for me, I'm trying to make a meaningful difference, thinking about the way I would want to make a big difference if I was starting a business. I'd be thinking the same way when I would think about donating or getting involved in any cause. I would think, how would it make a difference? Would it make a meaningful difference? Would it make an impact? The same way I would think about business. Would it move the needle? Would it help people? So I think that is that has all played into the development of my core principles for philanthropy. And of course, they continue to evolve. I continue to refine them. But it's part of the reason why I got involved in the Philippines. It was a very meaningful place for me, and the people there had a very meaningful impact on me. So when I think about giving back, it was very natural for me to want to give back to the Philippines and to give back in a meaningful way that would lift people up, not unlike the way they lifted me up in my life.
How did you come up with the idea of starting up a nonprofit?
Well, I originally didn't intend to start my own charity. It really came about as I was researching making donations, making meaningful donations, and really beginning to do the due diligence behind those donations. It's one thing in life when I might have spent $100 or $50 or things like that, but when you start reaching a point where maybe you'll make a $15,000 donation or a $50,000 donation or more, you start looking at the donation recipient very closely. And I began to look at that the same way I looked at making investments. And I did a lot of research and due diligence behind charities. And initially, what I found, I was a little disillusioned by them. I sort of characterize it like this. First, I found a lot of charities that I had known for years, and I always thought they would be charities I would want to support. But upon the due diligence that I would do, I found a lot of scenarios where a very small percentage of the donation that I was making actually reached the beneficiary, and that was a big concern to me. And usually it was high salaries or operating costs, marketing costs, a lot of a lot of costs were eating up ultimately the donations. So, as an investor, I looked at that as a poor investment. I saw that as making a low impact. And I also saw that as a bad way to give away very hard-earned money over the course of my lifetime. Then I found a second type of charity, which was really an effort to reach people with a high percentage of the donations. However, upon the due diligence of that group, I found very often some very well-meaning people that were just the worst business people I've ever seen. So they were very inefficient in terms of the way they delivered the services. One of the stories I tell metaphorically is the idea that people that would deliver paper towels, rolls of paper towels in an emergency by jet, each one delivered at a cost of $700, which could have been acquired locally for $1 a piece. So while that was a high percentage of donor money getting to people, it was an incredibly inefficient use of that money. So I found that as kind of a turnoff as well. So really one thing led to another, and being an entrepreneur, I said, well, I could do it better. I think I can combine the idea of getting 100% of donors' money direct to the recipients, and do it in a way that is very efficient, that represents very sound business principles, which is really what I've been all about for the last 40 years. Building businesses as a bootstrap entrepreneur.
Of all the causes, why eradicating poverty?
I witnessed a lot of poverty in the Philippines, and it was always interesting to see it juxtaposed very often right next to a great deal of abundance. In the Philippines, I saw wonderful financial districts that were thriving with young professionals, and just next door, there'd be shanty towns and ghettos where people were obviously struggling and having challenges. And then obviously the calamities in the Philippines were quite powerful. The typhoons that could take and wipe out everyone's home, or the volcanoes that would be erupting, or the earthquakes. So it was in the floods. Let's not forget the floods that happened during the rainy season. So all of those situations really struck me as moving people very quickly from a reasonable sustained existence to having very little or nothing. I was also amazed by the way that the Filipinos would be so resilient, and they would pick up the pieces and they'd rebuild every time. So year after year, as I'd witnessed these kinds of calamities, I'd also witness, weeks later, the rebuild underway, and no one was the worse for wear. So that's really what got me excited about the Philippines, the idea that you could be knocked down and you could get yourself right back up time after time after time. And I spent a lot of time trying to understand this culture that had this amazing resilience. And it was a very powerful thing for me. I've always thought of myself as somebody who recovers quickly from being knocked down. And certainly over the years, I've had many failures that I had to recover from. But it was sort of built into the culture to just accept the fact that there were going to be forces out there that were going to take you down, and you were simply going to get back up. Bayanihan is a really interesting concept that, kind of loosely, I think of it as doing something for others without expecting anything in return. And that's a pretty powerful concept. I think it exists in a lot of countries. I know 20 or 30 years ago, there was a little bit of a movement in the US. They would call it paying it forward, where you would sort of do something for someone with the idea that they would do something nice for somebody else. I saw that fad kind of come and go in the US, but I saw it baked into the Philippine culture, and seemingly has been there for hundreds of years. So I became, very fascinated by that concept of doing something for somebody else without expecting anything in return, and the concept of this amazing resilience that they would have to calamities. So, that really led me to thinking about how we could make an impact in the Philippines. The fact that as much as people were one storm away from having nothing, they might also be one hand up away from getting out of nothing. And so my effort has really been about perfecting the ways in which we could give them a hand up and put them on a good track. And that's really what the Bayanihan Project is all about.
Why do they need to care about poverty?
In the US, we have so much abundance. And if you spend most of your time living in the US, you begin to take for granted how much you have. There's an effort to, want to have more. 2 houses, 2 cars, many vacations. And that's fine. By the way, I enjoy all that myself, but I always appreciated going to the Philippines, where I found an incredible happiness among the people that wasn't built on materialistic wealth. At the core, the wealth came from the connections that they had with each other, and with building and maintaining family relationships. So I guess that the Philippines and the value system that they had, and the ability to find a happiness without having to find it in owning the next thing, was something that I appreciate, and something that I wanted to share, with the rest of the world, specifically my American friends, who may never had a chance to be associated with this kind of value system, and also may not have found the same kind of happiness that I saw in so many Filipinos, despite the fact that they didn't have these materialistic requirements.
How is Bayanihan Project different than other nonprofits?
Well, I wouldn't say it's different than all nonprofits, but I would say it is a best practice in nonprofits. In all of my research and in my effort to support various kinds of charities, I've found some great models that I wanted to follow. And I'll give you one, for example, the Robin Hood Foundation in New York. I admire their work. They commit 100% of the donors' money direct to the beneficiaries, and then all of the expenses are then funded through the gracious support of some very high net worth individuals who founded the organization and continue to sustain it. And I really like that model, and that's really the model that I built around the Bayanihan Project. So what we aspire to do is exactly that. We aspire to provide 100% of donations directly to the beneficiaries, and at the same time create a business and operations playbook that makes the delivery of those donations very efficient. So we call it the Bayanihan Playbook. It's really an effort to use every aspect of the kinds of methodologies that we built over the years that allowed us to be successful in starting and bootstrapping our businesses, in harnessing volunteers and and partnering with in local nonprofits and organizations that could get us close to the beneficiaries and identify them. So there's an elaborate effort underway really to not only deliver the dollars 100% to beneficiaries, but also to continually learn and work on ways to deliver them efficiently, the same way we would do it if we were operating a business for profit.
You touched on this earlier, Barry, about working with locals, and I heard about the Bayanihan beachhead model, how we work with other nonprofits in partnership with them. Can you talk about that and how it figures into the whole Bayanihan Project playbook?
Yeah, that's a good question, Hannah, and it's something we're very proud of. The beachhead is sort of our own term for a volunteer, typically someone who is probably within our network. They may be actually staff for one of my companies. They may be closely aligned colleagues to the Pure Incubation Ventures. And what they help us do is they help us identify in the Philippines local groups that we can begin to vet. And that's very important. The local groups could include churches or faith-based organizations, NGOs. And we have a great relationship with, for example, the Women's Police Association in a couple of the provinces, and it's very successful. So, we first find those local groups to work with, and what that does for us is unlocks a terrific volunteer network. So, as a result, there's no cost to our donors and to the organization to actually implement any of the programs that we do. The local groups, we work with them. We supply them with our methodology and our processes and our involvement and our follow-up, and we work with them in a way that's very intimate. Those local groups are typically the ones best suited to identify the beneficiaries. And then even as we do that, we may pilot programs first within an organization or within a community that we're targeting. Make sure that the proposed effort is going to work. One example might be taking 5 beneficiaries and making sure a program will work and be successful before we scale it to 50 or more. Yeah, I think that the playbook that we have found very efficient is working with other nonprofits who are very local, who are very embedded in the communities, who already understand who the key beneficiaries are, who have already done some of the legwork to consider and think about the way in which services could be delivered effectively. And then what we come in with an approach and a funding source to be a catalyst for plans that may already be underway and plans that simply need our help to execute.
Tell us about some of the more interesting projects from Bayanihan Project.
Oh, there's so many, and they're really varied, and that's what's made this fun. But one that always stands out, for me is the effort to help an indigenous tribe in the Philippines, and they were moving to another land where they were squatting and farming, and they needed to get going. The tribe needed to get going to sustain themselves. And so, the typical things would be required, seedlings and things like that to get the crops going. But when it came to farm tools, we thought, well, of course, you'd probably want a John Deere tractor. And I was surprised to find out that, no, they wanted a carabao. I didn't know what a carabao was. It's a water buffalo. So as I dug a little deeper to understand why they would want this farm tool, which is a carabao. By the way, when you buy a carabao in the Philippines, it actually comes with a plow attachment. I found that pretty interesting. But more importantly, a carabao wouldn't require maintenance, wouldn't require any fuel. It could live off the grass. It wouldn't complain. And by the way, when you were done with it, you could eat it. So it was perfect. It was the perfect farm tool for this tribe. So many interesting stories. For some 8 years, I had some kids that I was trying to sponsor to help them get through high school and into college. It's funny, you make these investments and they go on for a long time, and you get letters of appreciation and things like that. You don't think too much about it, except the fact that these young people came from incredibly modest existence, and their families were vegetable farmers, it's very exciting to see kids have an opportunity to get an education, a very good education in both high school and then go on and go to college. Certainly one of my most memorable experiences in sponsoring kids like this was a young gentleman named Ram who started life as the son of a vegetable farmer. I picked up trying to help sponsor him as he got a scholarship at the international school in Manila. And of course, the school was being paid for, but it was really all the other expenses that would result from moving from his province to Manila and attending school that needed to be covered. So that's where I was helping out. And 8 years later, and in fact, this last May, Ram graduated from Harvard. Very exciting. I'm very proud of Ram. I'm more proud of all the kids that I've sponsored over the years. But it was a pretty remarkable story based on where Ram came from and where he is today. And I hope they're grooming him to become a future president of the Philippines. One of the interesting stories was trying to assist women who were victims of sex trafficking in the Philippines, and that was an interesting discovery in terms of how human nature worked and how poverty can affect the dynamic in a family. And so what we discovered was, in working through an organization called Wipe Every Tear, who was doing wonderful work in basically trying to give women who had found themselves victims of sex trafficking, and they'd given them an alternative course to get a education, go to university, and hopefully become independent. But in peeling back a layer of that organization, there was a missing piece, and the missing piece was that no matter what they would do with the women in order to give them a new life, there was still the fact that the family was very often in the province. They were in poverty, and it was that poverty that would have had them looking the other way, when the women were becoming victims or they were vulnerable. The hope being some money might be sent back to the family. So it's an awful situation. So what we did is we tried to add a missing piece to what was a great program of Wiped Every Tear. And what we worked on is actually working at the family level to create livelihoods for the family, to put them in business, to eliminate the pressure from the women by virtue of the family having economic success. And that worked, extremely well. And that really changed the dynamic between the women and their family. So it was an effort of getting at the root of the poverty, and which was ultimately causing, some additional consequences, which were unfortunate.
How did your work at Bayanihan Project make an impact on you as a person, as a leader, as an entrepreneur?
We started small, and one of the things that we were committed to from the beginning was trying as much as we could as journalists to document, the projects. And it was the best decision that we made, because every project, we'd end up making a video. We'd do the best we could to tell the story of the project. And, I found myself moved like I've never been moved before, and moved emotionally, because I could see the hope and the potential that each beneficiary would see from the work that we were doing. And I just imagined, I guess like any entrepreneur, I imagined, my gosh, if we can do this with 5 people, or 50 people, or 500 people, could we do it with 500,000 people? And those same impacts, where we knew we were lifting a family out of poverty, where we were helping them with a sustainable livelihood, would that be something that we could scale? And that's it. Every time I would see those videos, they'd make me emotional, and I don't know why, but I wanted to be emotional a million times.
What's Bayanihan Project's vision for the future?
Well, our goal is to generate 1 million livelihoods in the Philippines. And 1 million livelihoods, we know, based on the average size of the family impacted, could mean impacting 5 million people. So that's our goal. That's what we're focused on. And everything that we do is really built around trying to create sustainable livelihoods that lift people out of poverty. Now, why not the rest of the world? Well, my passion is specifically, around helping the Philippines. But, clearly we're building something that's a powerful movement. And so we began to document the methods and approach that we have to being very efficient in delivering this. And we're building something called the Bayanihan Playbook. And what we want to do with the Bayanihan Playbook is, as we finish it, and I'm sure it will continue to evolve as we continue to learn, we want to make it available to organizations around the world. We want to be able to help other organizations become, more efficient, to mobilize volunteers, to find that Bayanihan spirit that I'm sure exists in many cultures in different ways. So that's really our vision. We want to focus on the Philippines ourselves, and then we want to take the playbook that we're building, and we want to allow that to be accessed by like-minded organizations that have the similar passion in Haiti or South Africa or India.